So I want to welcome everyone to our regular meeting of the Larkspur City Council for Wednesday, February 17th. We are starting at, I think, according to my clock, 6:32. This will be done as we do everything these days via Zoom. So I'm welcoming members of the public as well as our staff and our council members. So with that, could we start with a roll call and then the pledge?
Councilmember Candell?
I am here.
Councilmember Paulson?
Here.
Councilmember Way?
Here.
Vice Mayor Hilmer?
Here.
Mayor Way? I'm sorry, Mayor Haroff. Stuck in the
Well,
old
she can do it if she wants. It's fine. But I am here. So with that, if we could do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I see Dan has now connected up with our flag. So let's start. I pledge allegiance
to the
flag of the United States
of the United States
of America and to the republic
to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
with nation
under God,
one,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. God bless you all. Okay, well, thank you. Let's get started. So I think we'll move to agenda item number 2, which is public comment, which is only for matters that are not listed on the agenda. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on those matters. If there is anyone appearing this evening for that purpose, please state your name and where you live if you can, and we'll give you 3 minutes to provide your comments. So Allison, do we have anybody in the queue?
Our first comment will come from Joan Dubkowski. Joan, you may unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Joan Dubkowski, and I'm a mobile homeowner at Marin Park. I have been unemployed since March 15th, 2020, and many of my neighbors there are facing similar hardships. As you know, our rent was raised in October 2020 and is scheduled to be increased once again in June of this year. In other words, during this unprecedented and challenging time, some of the most vulnerable citizens in Larkspur are facing 2 rent increases within less than a year. Each increase is a $75 hike, and I want to point out to the council that almost half of the residents at Marin Park are on fixed incomes or retired. For one of my neighbors, her Social Security increase for 2020 was $8, not nearly enough to address the $75 rent increase. I hope that you will agree with me that this is the time to address affordable and mixed income housing in our city. The aftershocks of COVID are not going away, but rather illuminating these issues. And I respectfully request that this issue be formally added to the City Council agenda in March. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joan. Anyone else in the public queue? I think I see Kevin Carroll.
I apologize, I was on mute. Kevin Carroll, your next public comment.
Thank you. Kevin Carroll from Marin Park. Also, again, my Social Security went up last month, $20, and I'm facing another $75 rent increase in June. So that means in less than a year, my Social Security for the last 2 years has gone up $40, and my rent's going up $150. It's really not sustainable, especially with the COVID crisis, because my business is off 95%. And quite frankly, since it's tourist dependent, it's not coming back anytime soon, possibly not for another year. I would like to point out, I think from having read some of the reports, I believe all of you are homeowners, which make up 49% of the occupied housing in Larkspur. And I'd like to point out 51% of the housing in Larkspur is in rented units. The county, the cities of Novato and the city of San Rafael have all considered freezing rent increases for the duration of the COVID crisis, or at least through the end of this year. I would urge you to consider doing the same. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Anyone else in the queue?
Our next public comment will come from Tony McKeesich. And Tony, you may unmute yourself.
There I go. Thank you. Hi, council members. As you know, I'm also, my wife and I, residents of Marin Park. I fortunately am not in as bad a condition as either Joan or Kevin or many of the others in the park. My business only took a hit of about 20% this last year. Nonetheless, as of 3 years ago, I was able to generally be able to cover our rent increases with my Social Security increases. And that is no longer possible. And I would just like to point out to you that the arguments and points that Kevin and Joan made are well taken and represent a good number of us. And thank you for your consideration and all the work you've done these last years. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Tony.
Our next
Allison,
public
anyone
comment
else?
will come from
Okay.
Hey,
Simon,
this
can you
is
please
Simon.
state your full name and where you live?
Yeah, sure. I'm Simon Benson Chin. I live in Mill Valley, but I'm in Larkspur very frequently. I'm here to voice my support for the rent freeze proposed by the members of Marin Park. I've also like to share that I've been in a long conversation with Larkspur residents who've had their rent increased in one case of over 12% in the past 3 months. This particular resident works in grocery and their income hasn't increased to match that. It seems incredible and sustainable for a community that this kind of rent increases are allowed to happen at this time. And I encourage you to follow suit of San Rafael and the county and Novato when it comes to putting in a rent freeze. Thank you.
our next public comment
Okay,
will
thank
come
you.
from Bridget Gleason.
Thank you. I actually thought that I was going to be first in the list of our people because I emailed Allison yesterday morning, but it looks like I'm at the end of the queue instead. So thank you, Mayor Haroff, Vice Mayor Hilmer, and the City Council members for listening to us once again as we come before you, representing the Marin Park Residents Council, who are the resident homeowners of the Marin Park Mobile Home Park. As the people who've spoken before me have expressed, both the County Board of Supervisors, the City of San Rafael, and the City of Novato have recognized that during this pandemic time, it's a time to look somewhat differently at things that I understand we already looked at, but that was a very different time those few months ago. Tony may tell you that he hasn't had that much of an impact as some other people, but he's had a pretty significant impact on his income, and so have many other people. I'm wondering actually, how many of the people that are in this virtual meeting tonight have had 2 salary increases since October 2020? I'm betting that not one of us has. And yet our residents have had 2 very significant rent increases that represent on average 8 to 9% of their rent. You as the City Council of Larkspur have an opportunity to look at this portion of Census Tract 1212 that lies in your jurisdiction, which is essentially Marin Park Mobile Home Park, Golden Gate Mobile Home Park, and the small RV park that's right behind us, and to take action on this. This economic impact has been extreme on the majority of our community members. This is a social justice issue, and we are pleading for your help. We ask that you put us on the agenda for the March 3rd meeting so that we can present more detailed information on the economic impact that has occurred to our resident community and the reasons that you should take action on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Anyone else in the queue, Allison? I don't see anyone.
Yes, it looks like the remaining queue are speakers who have already spoke to the council this evening for public comment. So I don't know if you'd like to ask them to speak again or what your preference is.
Unless there's a pressing need for further comment, I think we'll move on to the next agenda item. And that would be agenda item number 3, presentations and proclamations. The Larkspur Community Foundation to provide an update on the recent virtual Heart of Larkspur celebration. And I think Sherry Mowbray is here to do that for us.
I am. Thank you so much, and good evening, council members. I'm really happy to be here on behalf of the Larkspur Community Foundation, and first and foremost want to, here's my video, here I am. First and foremost, want to thank you as a council for your continuing partnership with us at Larkspur Community Foundation. We are thrilled that this year, the holiday season, is when we do our major push for donations, and we had our best year ever this past holiday season in terms of donations to our foundation, which I think is a reflection of the really good work that we did in this 2020 crazy year during COVID, and really being able to reach out and help the community. So thank you for your support of us. What I wanted to talk to you all about was the Heart of Larkspur event that we co-host together every year, and super disappointing to all of us. I know that we are not able to host an event in person, but as a board, we decided, and with your approval and support as well, that instead of doing an in-person event, which we can't do, to instead offer each of our volunteers a $5 gift certificate to Farmhouse Local, which is the vendor who has catered our event the last few years. And they've done a beautiful job. They've been very generous, and obviously they're a local Larkspur business. So we decided to give them business. We purchased 200 $5 gift cards. We then sent out evites to all of the volunteers in our database, which is 337 volunteers. Not all of them live in Larkspur. Most of them do, but not all. But they all volunteer here in all of the different organizations that we've seen represented at the event in person over the last several years. We encouraged all of those volunteers to email us with their mailing address so that we could mail them a gift certificate. And to date, 61 people have responded. We've sent the evite 3 times. Keep trying to, get more people to reach out to us. 61 people have responded and been sent the gift certificates. And I think that many people didn't want to ask for a freebie, and a few people did write to us and say that specifically, that they so appreciated the offer, but to please use the gift certificates for something else. I wanted to share just a few brief comments, because they have been just, the people that have emailed us have just been so overwhelmingly gracious and appreciative of our recognizing them, our the city and the Larkspur Community Foundation. So just a few. Thank you for the offer of the gift card to Farmhouse Local as appreciation of my volunteering at Marin Health for the past 44 years. Another person said, what a wonderful way to support a local business. Another one said, thank you for the thoughtful card to honor volunteers. I have always enjoyed and look forward to the Legion Hall gathering to see my fellow volunteers. I graciously accept the $5 gift card. It will be a pleasure to support a business in Larkspur. And then thank you for your continued cultivation of community in Larkspur. I would enjoy using the offered gift certificate to spend more at a contributing local business. So those are just a few feel-good comments that we got. So because this is a joint effort between the city and the foundation, we now have a challenge in front of us, which is, what do we do with the remaining gift certificates? I think we'll get a few more people trickling in, but we're going to have quite a few left over. And our board meets next week, and we'll come up with ideas. But I wanted to throw it out to all of you to see if you have, particular thoughts or ideas about what we jointly could do with these gift certificates. Obviously, there's a double point here. One being that we want to acknowledge our volunteers, and there are some people who have not responded to us who we do have a mailing address for, so we could find those people and, sleuth out and mail them a gift certificate. But we do want to give them, out because we want those people to go to Farmhouse Local too. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts that I could bring back to our board and share.
Well, Sherry, this is Kevin. I do, unless anyone else wants to offer something. One suggestion, and I know there's been some interaction between the foundation and the Chamber of Commerce.
Yes, a lot.
Yeah, so I think that relationship is a positive one, and if this is a way in which we can have the Chamber and the foundation accomplish your goal, I think that might be a productive thing. So please talk to Julie Servetto about that if that seems like a good idea for you.
Are you suggesting that that as people donate to our organizations that we would give out the gift certificates, or just to talk to Julie about ideas?
Just to talk to Julie about
Okay.
ideas.
I
Yeah.
will do that. Yes.
I have some. Hi, Kevin. I have.
Yeah, no, please go ahead, Catherine.
Hi, Sherry. Thank you very much for this presentation of what you did over the course of the last year. I know particularly working with the Chamber of Commerce and helping a lot of our small businesses was really important. I have a stack of I Love Larkspur stickers. So this next year when we have a party, I'll pass those out again. I recall sort of the last event that we did, and I introduced the new council members last year at the event before we all went into lockdown was your Heart of Larkspur party. So thank you for that. My only suggestion is I think the people who have not stopped working from the very beginning in this pandemic have been our first responders. So our law enforcement and fire personnel and our city staff, who I consider first responders too. So that's an idea to put in there, is that they have not stopped working to serve the community.
Great.
Yeah, also a really good suggestion, and we can help facilitate that.
Okay, and we will, as a board, we haven't met since this all happened, so we'll meet next week and we'll share back to Dan, our ideas, and he can share with you what we're thinking of doing. So make sure you're all okay with that.
Okay, anything else on this?
Just one idea I had was to consider the Twin Cities villages.
Yes. Okay. Great.
Okay, unless I hear something more, just thank you, Sherry, for coming tonight, sharing these thoughts and suggestions and engaging with the city. It's important and appreciated.
Thank you all so much.
So let me refine my agenda here. Hold on just a moment. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that's agenda item number 3. We will move on to agenda item number 4, which is approval of the consent calendar. And I guess I will initially ask if any members of the council wish to remove any of these items for separate consideration. Hearing none, let me ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to take one of these items off and be considered for separate review.
Looking for any
Allison, do you
raised
see one?
Looking for any raised hands from our audience members, and there is no request to remove items.
Okay, good deal. So in that case, I will ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do we need a roll call?
Councilmember Kendall,
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Way,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hilmer,
Yes.
Mayor Hara.
Yes. And the motion is passed. So great. Let's move on to agenda item number 5, which is the city manager's oral report, and we'll pass it off to Dan.
Mr. Mayor and council members, I first wanted to make a note about the consent calendar. This evening, you've passed some items that I recommended to make some modifications to staffing in the library. And I really want to take this opportunity to let the council and the community know just how fortunate we are as we go through COVID and its impacts on the economy and the changes that we've had to make to our own operations to provide service to the city. We're just so fortunate that we have an employees association that has worked closely with us and has always had the health of the organization and its service to the community in mind. And the items you passed this evening reflect the ongoing dialogue that I have with the employee association to make smart decisions as we navigate the world we're in right now. So just want to acknowledge that they've put in a lot of hard work to help us survive. I did have one announcement for the community and the council. We are expecting that by the end of the week, construction is going to begin on the North-South Greenway project. This is an ongoing series of projects that are done in phases with the long-term goal of constructing a new multi-use path on the east side of Easter Francis Drake off-ramp so that it will connect the Centralman Ferry connector to Old Redwood Highway. So this is going to be a right there, and everybody's going to see it. Caltrans will be managing it. A lot of activity on Old Redwood Highway around where the off-ramp to the freeway is. So folks want to be aware of that, be conscious there's construction in that area. And the good news is when they're done, we're going to have a much safer and easier to use bike path to carry us over that particular area. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thanks for that. I just am always amazed when we have these opportunities to get together and hear reports on the progress of our public infrastructure projects. I've said it many times. Every time I go down by the Bon Air Bridge, I'm just blown away by the immensity of that project. And I'm looking forward eventually to it getting completed, and I'm sure everyone else in the community is as well. So thank you for that report. And at that, I will turn to council members and see if any members of the council have oral reports they'd like to share with us tonight.
I have one.
Yes, please go ahead.
So since we last met, the Central Marin Fire Council and the Central Marin Police Authority Councils met, and Mayor Haroff and myself are representatives. And at both of those meetings, we heard the audit report, and the audit report was passed and approved by both councils at the time. And it was a thoroughly done report for all of us, and it's available. I believe it will be on the Central Marin Police Authority website and the Central Marin Fire website for those who are interested. We also switched leadership roles. So I was chair of the Police Council. It is now Councilmember Ford Green from San Anselmo, and the Fire Council remains the same with leadership of Bob Ravazio from Corte Madera and Mayor Haroff from Larkspur as the vice chair. So it went well, and we continue to be pleased with our level of fire representation and coverage within our community and police coverage. That's my report.
Great. And just as a footnote, just to be clear, those audit reports were clean.
Yes, they were. And
they were good reports, and they reflect well upon the financial management, which our city provides a lot of support to. So very, very pleased to have that report being given. Anyone else on the council? Gabe, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just a couple things. One is in the middle of rainy season here. We're really trying to prepare for the summer and fire through both the neighborhood response groups and the Marin Wildfire Prevention Agency. So the latest updates are that we are growing our activity and membership in Hills which is really wonderful, and even have extended out to Kentfield. So, that work continues. And then we have the daylight savings time after the next council meeting. So I'll bring it up again on March 3rd, but I want to encourage, we have a bigger audience tonight, 26 people, people to really think about what neighborhood you are in, what your block captain and neighborhood response group is. And these drills are wonderful. Even during COVID, all it is required is to put an okay sign or a help sign on your window. And it kind of gets the awareness so that, although things aren't really pressured and urgent right now, we prepare ourselves, because in the event of a big fire, we know first responders won't be there for quite some time. So really encourage people to participate in that. And then my second comment is to express appreciation for, all the Marin Park people. I've worked with Mayor Hariff with them, a lot last year. And, in the spirit of public, comment here and public discourse, I'm willing to reach out to them and see what we can do. I've, wondered how things have gone. It's been several months. I appreciate, all that they've said. Situations have changed. So if, the other 4 council members are okay with it, we don't have any formal committee or ad hoc committee, but I'd be willing to, find out what's going on and see if we can agendize something for next week. I'm sorry, next month.
Well, let me take the liberty and volunteer you for that role.
Okay, so accepted.
Please do. And just one quick question on the fire issue. One of the things I think we've all been paying a little bit of attention to are notifications from the water district about water supply, and the fact that even though it seems to have been a reasonably rainy winter so far, apparently it's not been. And I'm wondering if there's been any discussion within the work that you do about the capabilities of providing water resources to confront fire risks going forward this summer.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. Tomorrow is the next Marin Wildfire Prevention Agency meeting. It hasn't been discussed in 2021. The latest was the Zone Haven alarm system, which we're prototyping now, and that was in the Marin IJ. And the project plan is being formulated, but I'll report back if I hear anything about water, the firefighting ability of the water supplies.
Yeah, that I think that would be of interest to the community in general. So if that's an opportunity that you have to report back to the rest of us in the community, I think that'd be really worthwhile. Spring is here, summer will be here soon, and fire season is upon us. So any other reports from council members? I don't see. Oh, Scott.
Just quickly.
Scott, go ahead.
Thank you. We had the Chamber of Commerce meeting this afternoon. I just wanted to inform the public we are in the process of trying to reach out to the public and see how the Chamber can better serve our community. We'll be trying to get surveys out and get everybody's feedback. In the meantime, if anybody can think of a way the Chamber can serve the business community better, I just want to encourage you to go to the Chamber of Commerce website, larkspurchamber.org. At the bottom, there is a link that just says contact us. And if you can just put your comments in there, we'd be happy to consider them and see how the Chamber can be more effective in serving the business community. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. The work of the Chamber is important, and I was on that meeting as well. So Gabe, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And for Scott and you both on the Chamber, I'm curious if there was any reporting out about the Comcast project. I think there's something Julie was working on, Julie Servetto, for supporting minority businesses, and I think it might be called RISE, the RISE program. I'm wondering if there's been any updates on how that's going.
I don't think she reported on that, although I think that's part of what she's working on with other chambers throughout Marin. So we can get some more information about that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other council members? Mr. Helmer, anything? If not, I think we'll close that section because I think my topics have been covered, and we will go on to public hearings. So I think we have two related ones. Items 7.1 and 7.2. 7.1 is consideration of renaming of Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. 7.2 is consideration of the use or disposition of the Sir Francis Drake statue. And I think it's important for the public to understand that we are addressing these issues as separate items tonight. So to the extent that we have council or public comments on these items, let's make sure we try to keep them separate. I know these are both matters of public interest. But let's start with item 7.1, the consideration of renaming of Sir Francis Drake Boulevard and where we are on that. And if we could have a staff report, I would appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. So at your last meeting, you held one sort of encompassing public hearing to start the conversation on these various topics. At your direction, we, as the mayor indicated, separated those topics into two hearings this evening. So the first one you will deal with is the question of how Larkspur, as one of the 5 jurisdictions considering whether to rename Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, how Larkspur, what your position may be on that. At your last council meeting, we presented the overall staff report about the issues and how the conversation came before the council. We'll just incorporate that into the record. At your direction, though, you asked that we bring back 2 particular points and make it clear on the agenda that they might be discussed as part of this evening's conversation. So we provided a supplemental staff report this evening that talks about the concept of co-naming. That was a question that came up at the last meeting, and the council asked for some background. This is the idea of there being 2 names for the street. And as we indicated in the staff report, there's various different ways you might consider doing a co-naming arrangement. But the most common 2 we found around the country, one is to simply have 2 street signs up and 2 names are in use. One is often indicated as the more ceremonial name and one's the long-standing legal name, but both names become, in all practicality, the names of the street. And then another more symbolic one that had been raised is the idea of the El Camino Royal and sort of doing some sort of historical demarcation of a path as an indication of a road's other historical significance. So those are talked about in the staff report. There's some photos available in the staff report to view. And then the second topic that council members expressed interest in being able to discuss as part of this public hearing was that if you choose not to participate in the renaming but you wanted to take the amount of public funds that might have to be spent on a renaming process, could the council use those funds to set up some sort of account or fund to be used later to promote issues of diversity, equity, and inclusivity? So we've added that to the agenda so that it's clear to the public you may be discussing and considering that in some form this evening. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I turn it back to you and the council for your consideration. This is agendized as a public hearing, so after the council's initial discussion, you should open it up to the public.
I will do that. Thank you for that. And thank you for your thoughtful review of these issues and the presentation and the staff report. I think all of that is helpful. So before we move on, can I ask the members of the council if there are any questions for our city manager with respect to his report?
I have one, Kevin.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the committee that met last year to discuss this matter involving the council members from 5 different jurisdictions, and I know it was you, Kevin and Scott, was the concept of co-naming brought up and discussed among that group?
So Scott, jump in if you wish. I don't. My recollection does not tell me that that was a primary topic of conversation. Most of the work that was done by that group over time was really to introduce the topic to the community and to provide historical and cultural background to inform the conversation. Really, it was not a function of that group to, at least at that time, to provide recommendations for how this discussion might resolve itself. And I think that's been pretty consistent with the way that committee has worked, certainly with the way we have engaged the subject within the city of Larkspur. I know other communities have been more willing to make decisions before that process has concluded itself. I'm actually very grateful for our city council and our community to show the patience that it has in allowing the conversation to continue, and make sure that we're all well informed about the context in which the discussion is occurring. But no real proposals for outcomes have come out of that committee conversation. Scott, if you have a different recollection, please correct me.
No, that's exactly the same as well.
Thanks.
Yeah. So these are all open issues, and I think we do have an opportunity to continue the conversation with the public. Obviously, we've gotten a lot of emails on both sides of the issue, and I'm frankly grateful for the level of public engagement on this, because I think it's an important topic. I think I saw Gabe's hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a point of clarification on the second, public hearing, the statute. So the three options were.
So Gabe, if we could defer that conversation until we get to
Okay.
that item, I think
Okay.
that might make things a little cleaner.
Sure.
I don't want to cut you off if there's something you really think that needs to be raised at this point, but okay. Anything else from the council on this? Okay, well, in that case, I have some things that I'd like to express, but I think I'll wait till we have an opportunity for the public to comment. So at that point, I think we should open it up as a public hearing. Is that the right process? Okay, so let's open it up. Allison, it's all yours.
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. In the meantime, we did receive an emailed public comment that I'll read to the council now. This comes from Jacob Johnson. Dear Larkspur City Council, I have lived in Greenbrae for nearly 10 years. The council's discussion at the last council meeting to make substantive changes to promote equality is inspirational. The spirit of hope and opportunity for all of our residents should be reflected in the name of our main thoroughfare. Symbols are important, and so please support renaming SFD Boulevard to reflect our full history and new future. Best, Jacob. And again, this came from Jacob Johnson. And our next public comment will be Speaker Tamara Alliston.
Tamara, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Tamara Alliston, and I first want to thank you, Mayor and council members, for listening to the public's feedback. It's a pleasure to share that with you. As a Larkspur resident and a block captain in the Navarro NRG, I just also want to say thank you for your leadership of this program and the emergency preparedness efforts that are really making a difference in my neighborhood. Tonight, I'm calling in support of renaming Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. In thinking about this issue, I reached out to my son. He's a proud graduate of Redwood High School and is now in college in Southern California, where he's taking classes on racial inequality and reconciliation from leading thinkers in our time. And in our conversations, he's shared with me his growing awareness about racial inequity and measures to fix it. And he's looked at his experience in his formative years in Marin through a new lens. So he quickly pivoted from issues about renaming a street to his desire for improved access to affordable housing and to outstanding education that he received at Redwood for people of all backgrounds. I hear in his voice the passion to give back to the community as a future leader and to help make these dreams real. Unfortunately, he's in physics lab tonight, or he would have called and shared this himself. But when he spoke, I was inspired and hopeful about the changes that would lead to these big and meaningful things that we hope to see equity for all. And then he asked me about you all, the leaders of Larkspur today. Why wouldn't we change the name? He said that this is an easy and immediate next step that would move us towards the harder and long-term changes that will bring us closer to equity and inclusion. So I pose his question to you tonight. Why wouldn't we change the name? Why not take this simple step today to declare publicly with a sign on 101 our commitment? Why not change a few street signs, ask the handful of Larkspur businesses with Sir Francis Drake addresses to update their business cards? So I commend you to make this down payment on tomorrow's big and hard changes today, to make the job for tomorrow's leaders easier by taking these steps. So in conclusion, I support renaming Sir Francis Drake Boulevard so that we can pave the way towards the lasting change by renaming this Larkspur stretch of pavement today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara, and thank you for keeping your comments well within the our timer. I appreciate that. Anyone else in the public who's out there, Allison, who wants to say something at this time?
I will note that the council received 8 written public comments prior to the meeting, which were made available to the council and on the online agenda packet. And I'm looking for any further raised hands or emailed public comment. And there is no further public comment.
Okay, great. Well, I guess in light of that, we can close the public hearing and move it back to the council. If I have that right. So let's bring it back to the council for comments and expression of views.
So Mayor Hoff, I have a question about process.
Yeah.
I think this came up at our previous meeting. Can you outline for us what your expectation is of after, is this the second, or will there be more public hearings on this topic, or would you like us to reach a conclusion tonight? Or how do you envision this continuing to unfold?
Well, I hope we make progress tonight, if that's a question. I don't think we need to make a definitive decision. I think there's a lot of work still to be done and a lot of engagement with the community still to occur. You know, I have some views about how that might want to go, but I'd like to hear from other members of the council on that. I don't think we don't need to make a decision. We actually don't really have a renaming decision in front of us right now. Nobody's suggested an alternative name, but that is something that we need to address. If not tonight, soon, and other jurisdictions are doing that. And part of the conversation I think we need to have is how we interact with neighboring jurisdictions, including in particular the county, which kind of mostly surrounds us and has a lot to say about the naming, and I'll get to that later. So I don't know if that answers your question.
More or less. I'm in reading many of the emails, there was, and a lot of the online comments, it was, there were questions about how long we intend this process to go. And whether it's
yeah. If that's your question, I think the idea among all of the different jurisdictions that are participating in this conversation is to have this wrapped up by the end of March.
Okay, that helps me to understand where you're guiding this.
Yeah. So this is a continuation of the conversation I think we had in our previous meeting. It would be helpful to get further clarity from the council tonight and the public about the direction that we should be taking, but no outcome at this time has been determined. Any other comments or questions from the council?
I think I see another raised hand. I don't know if that was an old hand.
Is that Scott? Scott, are you raising your hand? I can't see.
Yeah, but is there someone from the public that has their hand raised? Is that what you're saying, Catherine?
Yes, there are additional raised hands coming in for public comment if you'd like to return to them.
Sure. I think we ought to do that. If that requires us to reopen the public hearing, then let's reopen the public hearing and hear from those who would like to express themselves. So Allison, I'll let you organize that.
Sarah Swigert, you may unmute yourself for public comment.
Wonderful. Thank you for reopening. My name is Sarah Swigert. I've been a resident of Larkspur for just the last year and a half, best year and a half of my life. I hesitated to speak up because I didn't prepare comments, but I did want to say that I am opposed to the renaming efforts. I do see what's going on across the country and across the bridge, you know, removing names like George Washington from schools. And I think that if we're on a quest to remove the names of historical figures, trying to find anybody without sin and wrongdoing, that is a Sisyphean task that can never quite be achieved. I think I heard an alternative proposed of taking some funds that would be spent on changing roadsides and investing in our communities and diverse opportunities. That is something that I support more, but broad strokes to remove names of historical figures, again, trying to find anybody without wrongdoing, is a long and mighty task. So I'll just like to say that I do oppose the efforts to rename, but would support other investments from the city of Larkspur towards promoting equality and opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that. Do we have someone else, Allison, who's in the queue?
Our next public comment will come from caller ending in 1402.
James Holmes, Larkspur. Without repeating everything I said at the last hearing, I'd like to list briefly both the 4 reasons I mentioned then, plus a couple of others, 9 in total, for not dropping Drake's name, even if you should add others. Reason number 1, different names in different jurisdictions would not be good. Reason number 2, undue burden on residents and businesses at a bad time. Number 3, the story of how the street was named for Drake is itself a part of Marin's history. Number 4, Drake's European heritage is relevant to most Marinites. Number 5, Drake is the only world historic celebrity connected to Marin, notwithstanding several last century rock stars. 6, Drake may be relevant to Larkspur in particular because 70 scholarships suggested that he may have landed here, hence all the Larkspur place names we have, great place names. Number 7, evidence indicates Drake redeemed himself with respect to his treatment of ex-slaves and indigenous peoples. Number 8, evidence indicates that Drake got along with Marin's indigenous peoples. And number 9, no evidence indicates that a majority of Marinites or Larkspur residents favor dropping Drake's name, let alone a majority of those along the boulevard. And with respect to the latter point, for the rest of my time, I'd like to share at least some of Cindy Winter's list of all that would need to be changed if the name changed. She titled it Citizens Unproductive Labor List, and here it goes. Registrar of Voters, DMV, driver license or real ID, vehicle or vessel. Internal Revenue Service, Franchise Tax Board, Social Security, passport, bank accounts, maybe charge for new checks, investment accounts, credit cards, homeowners insurance policies, auto umbrella coverage, Medicare if applicable, Medicaid if applicable, health insurance, medical providers, mail order prescriptions, publication subscriptions, school records, utilities, internet services, landlines, billings and directory listings, PG&E or MCE, online shopping sites, UPS, FedEx. She didn't mention Employment Development Department, but God help anyone have to do that. Mortgage and lease forms and records, promissory notes, other existing contracts and legal documents, Christmas card list for businesses, new stationery, business cards, notify all customers and clients, accounts payable and receivable, signage, business license, business insurance policies, tax returns, website information, location, maps, etc., etc. You get Cindy's point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. That was helpful. Who else is in the queue?
Our next comment will come from Zeke Johnson.
Hi, I'm Zeke Johnson, a senior at Redwood High School and a resident of Larkspur. Thank you, council members, for your hard work throughout the pandemic and for allowing for this discussion. I am calling in support of alternating the name of Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. According to one of the educational resources provided by the Marin County Library, and I quote, Francis Drake also played a central role in the foundation of England's involvement in the slave trade and was, says Professor Claire Jowett, a murderer. While I certainly admire Drake's incredible accomplishments, looking back on history, Drake's actions do not embody what I believe Larkspur and Marin County stand for. Francis Drake stole people from their homes and enslaved them. He owned people. While I know I'm a relatively young member of the community, and I might not fully understand the attachment to Sir Francis Drake, from my perspective, it is time to take a more comprehensive view of the past and stop idolizing Drake by naming our main road after him. And acknowledging some of the other points made, definitely change is always hard and requires effort. But if we can't even change one road name, then what can we really expect of our community? And I guess I admire Sir Francis Drake for his accomplishments, as I said, and I realize that it might be hard to find a new name that doesn't, of people who don't have sins in their lives, but I think we need to admit that owning people is not okay. And I think that this is an important first step. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all your hard work.
Zeke, thank you very much for those comments. And as the parent of a Redwood High School graduate, I appreciate your engagement and contribution to this conversation. Allison, anyone else in the queue?
Our next comment will come from Bruce Brugler.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for letting me talk. I'll be relatively brief here. I oppose the change of the name of Sir Francis Drake for just several reasons. One is from my understanding, that any real factual analysis of Drake's involvement in the slave trade showed that he did not actually own slaves, that it was a very small role that he played in the context of his overall life. Was relatively minor. And in fact, if anything, it appears as though he actually had a very positive turn in terms of his interactions with people of color. But I think there's two other main points that I'd make. Well, the first is, where does this stop? And I think that this is going to be applicable to the next agenda item with respect to the statute too, is where does this stop? We rename this street, what's next? How many other streets are in our town? How many other things can be perceived by someone to have some injustice that needs to be undone and makes demands to do so, that results in a change that really doesn't accomplish anything at the end of the day? And then my final point is, I think those that are interested in changes like this intend good, but what's the result in our community? I think it fosters divisiveness. I think that this is forcing change on people who have strong opinions, perhaps a change that's driven by a vocal minority, something that we have, to the best of my knowledge, has never been tested in an election to see what the actual representation of our voters is on this issue. And it is fostering divisiveness rather than inclusiveness. So I remain against the name change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bruce, for that. Allison, who's next?
Our next comment will come from Larry Chu.
Mr. Chu.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. The last time I wrote in, I wrote about things related to the process rather than a specific solution. As I listened to your discussion the last time, it started out as a public policy discussion on issues of social equity and inclusion, and then quickly changed to one of finances. One should not be the opposite side of the coin to the other in this discussion. It's not to say that the finances shouldn't be considered, but it became the primary driver. On the issue we have with widely divergent viewpoints, I've always found that there's something in between the extremes. And I used to say that if the vast majority of people didn't like something about the decision, it's probably okay. You just don't get everything you want. In this case, the the solution probably falls somewhere between what a University of Washington professor in multicultural education, her name is Robin DiAngelo, termed as white fragility, and the cancel culture. You know, we need to be able to come up with some kind of framework in between. And it goes back to a series of questions that I'd written to you in terms of, you know, how the discussion should go. At this point, I've seen the staff report. There seems to be no time to create one, given that the county wants to have the decision made to save money on signage while there's construction on Sir Francis Drake. But there's also a legitimate concern that now is not a good time to impose this kind of expense on property owners. But there's also no reason why Larkspur can't take more time and taking a more structured policy approach in making its determination. If the decision is made to proceed with the renaming, you can always defer the implementation until the economy recovers. But in terms of precedent, the road from Kentfield to Mill Valley has a different name in each of its 4 jurisdictions. So, you know, I really don't see a lot of the arguments that have come up as necessarily being an impediment to a more structured discussion about being able to answer, you know, like one gentleman just said, well, where does it stop? Because that was one of the questions I raised. You know, so, you know, maybe you should take the time to, you know, create that type of framework yourself so that you can come to a better way of, you know, a specific way to say, yes, we made the right decision on this rather than to act on it emotionally. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Larry. As always, your comments are thoughtful and appreciated, and I'll have some things to say that are relevant to what you just contributed when I have my turn. Do we have someone else in the public who would like to speak?
I'm looking for any further raised hands or any emailed public comment. And there is no further public comment.
Okay, great. So we're right on time. So with that, I think we'll close for the second time the public hearing and bring it back to the council for comments and suggestions. Anyone like to speak? Yep. Okay, you're all popping up your hands here. So I think the first hand popped up was Catherine's. Go ahead.
I just want to thank Larry Chu's written comments that he gave to us and the ones he just provided now, because I think we're really overstepping a policy discussion that we should be having before making, in my opinion, before making significant change like this. We have 5 or 6 other places within our jurisdiction that have the name Drake, from Drake's Landing to an office park. We have lots of other names that may fall under this rubric of trying to look at removing some names from our historical record and moving on to other ones. But we don't have a policy framework to come that we've reached or discussed how that process goes about and how, whether we survey people and residents and businesses that are along that particular street, how the renaming process, what individuals or entities are acceptable renamed. There's just a lot more policy in here, and I'm thinking we're a little bit ahead of that conversation. That's my thoughts based on what Larry Chu was just talking about.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I think, Scott, you had your hand up as well.
Thanks, and thank you to everybody who spoke. It's really helpful for us to hear from everybody. Obviously, you know, everyone has good intentions in addressing this, just different opinions. So let me just share the way I looked at this as I was thinking about it and listening to everybody's comments. Personally, when I heard the Confederate General statute being taken down, I was in favor of that. When I heard that a school in San Francisco, a Abraham Lincoln School, was being renamed, I was not in favor of that. And I was trying to figure out why. What is the difference? And the conclusion I came to was that the Confederate statutes are there to honor the act of being a Confederate general. That it's not somebody who was a physicist, but, oh, by the way, they were also in the Confederate Army. It was, we are honoring this person for this reason. For Abraham Lincoln, I think the reason the name was changed was not for what he was famous for what he did, but for something, one of his imperfections, something in his past that maybe he wasn't perfect, but yet, he was being honored as a president that did all these wonderful things. When I use that to view Sir Francis Drake, based on the history that I've read and all the work that we've done, is someone who was an explorer from England in the 1500s, became the first Englishman to circumnavigate the globe, came to the Americas, tried to find a way around to the north. It got too cold, so he came back, stopped in Marin, met indigenous people. They got along, they traded, got back on their boats, sailed around the southern way and ended up back in England. He was knighted. And that's what he's famous for. That's why he was honored by both the statue and the name of the road. Is he perfect? Absolutely not. Does he have flaws? Yes. But the idea of where does it stop? Again, everybody has their own moral compass. And there's a line somewhere between the Confederate, in my mind, between the Confederate general and Abraham Lincoln, of what, needs to be changed and what doesn't. And for me, Sir Francis Drake is on the side with Abraham Lincoln. Not that he's an Abraham Lincoln, but that we're not honoring him because he was involved in the slave trade. So I think that everybody's intention is to improve social equity. I think there are better ways. Intention is to honor a person or to honor a culture. I think there are better ways to do that also than changing the name of a street. So for those reasons, I am leaning towards, and also for everything that, James said about all the problems with the businesses and all the expenses and hassle that people have to go through. I would think that we as a council and as a community can make the decision. We want to honor this group of people. We want to do something towards social justice and come up with something better than rename the street. And that's why I think at the last meeting, what I was suggesting was, and I had mentioned, yes, we could take the money and put it towards something better, but I just think that there's something better that we could do, and that the good doesn't outweigh the harm in changing the name. That's kind of where I am right now.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. And anyone else from the council? Gabe, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I wanted to make 3 comments. I think we've, had a lot of this discussion last meeting, and the first comment is about how much longer we should continue the conversation. So, I noticed there are 20, to 30 people in the room here, and only a few have spoken. I think a lot of people have come because they're awaiting a decision. And I think that, the actual leanings have not really changed much. Tamara expressed, that we should, Zeke expressed we should, Bruce and Sarah and James said we shouldn't. This has been unchanging for me. I've really reached out to the community. I've called people, I've talked to people. I went on record saying I really hear honest differences, and I don't expect that that's really going to change. I think Larry's point about process is excellent. And, Catherine is reinforcing that and you yourself, that there's a lot of things that could be refined here. But last meeting, I really wanted to reframe this discussion because I think that symbols are important, but in this case, I feel like symbols are getting in the way. And the intention of this council and the intention of this community, in my opinion, is to be socially just, to be inclusive. And I think we can drag this process along and find ourselves excited about the symbol in our hearts and in our pocketbooks. We're willing to get to work. And I brought up 4 specific instances or 4 specific places where we can start really helping people of color and Miwoks and anyone who's not felt included in this community. And the Police Review Commission is one. Earlier in the meeting, the Chamber of Commerce is another. If we have funds, we pulled a lot of funds out of the chamber. We could put more in to really promote minority businesses. And MyHip, which is working with youth, and that could really work forward on racism and diversity programs. I mean, I don't believe anyone who said they don't want the name changed also feels they want to push people out of this community or want it white only. And I think that that's the unfortunate stigma that's sitting in front of us. And so my third point is I'm ready to move this forward. And last time I proposed co-naming, it's in our staff report. We see that the cost of co-naming would be about $1,000. I have not gotten any vociferous or angry, response after making that, a suggestion at the last meeting that this is not going to work for anybody. I do feel the people who don't want it to change will be upset if it is, and the people who want it to change will be upset if it isn't. I think this does allow us to build something which is rare these days, and that's a bipartisan consensus. And when people are more bipartisan and in consensus, we can focus on the substantive issues of policing, education, housing, and so forth. So I'm ready to make a motion if the council so wishes.
Not yet. Vice Mayor Helmer, do you have anything you want to contribute to the conversation here?
Yes, I appreciate everything that's been said this far, and I think there's a direction, and Gabe's motion might provide the opportunity for us to pursue not a renaming, but a strengthening of the identity and the character of the corridor itself through what we decide to do to add to, instead of changing the name, add to the identity of the corridor. For example, a sort of co-naming, if that's the form it takes, or some expression of the history that's not fully understood, with markers, or if there are interpretive sites, locations, including the one we're about to discuss, is the next part of this hearing. There might be ways to add to enhance the historic and identity of the corridor, instead of changing the name. So I'd like to, whatever we decide to do, make sure if we don't rename, that we are saying this isn't over. There are things we want to do to make sure that we're capturing the meaning we're trying to express through this conversation. So if Gabe's motion inspires that, I think I'm ready to hear it.
I think we'll create an opportunity for Gabe to make that motion in a formal way after all of us have had a chance to express our views. And anything else from the council before I have an opportunity?
I just wanted to echo, I appreciate your thoughtfulness about that, Gabe. I think we had 8 members of our public who live in our mobile home community speak in public comment, and they are really in a socioeconomic situation of inequity, and that's within our own community here that could use a lot of our time and attention. So I appreciate your comments, Gabe.
Okay, anything else from the council? So then I guess it's my turn. I appreciate all the thoughtful contributions from members of the council, as well as from members of the public. and our old friend Larry Chu, who every time I hear his voice, it just cheers me up. So just a couple of thoughts. I think you all know that I have expressed my personal views on this matter in other settings, including Marin Voice pieces in the Independent Journal and elsewhere, about the importance of a name change, and those views have not changed. That said, my most important goal in this conversation at this time is to avoid disparate treatment of the naming issue among different jurisdictions. This is a practical consideration. The city of Larkspur has jurisdiction over a relatively small section of the road, mostly in the vicinity of Larkspur Landing. I think it basically extends from around where the Shell station is up into San Quentin, underneath Highway 101. The County of Marin has jurisdiction over most of the rest of the road that is within Larkspur's sphere of influence, including portions of the road adjacent to the Bon Air Shopping Center, past Bon Air Road, beyond the College of Marin, and up to the city of Ross. So that's the section of the road that most of our residents traverse when they're coming and going for whatever reasons. The county also has jurisdiction over sections of the road beyond Ross, San Anselmo, and Fairfax, extending into West Marin. And they are going through their own process about what the renaming issue might end up looking like. I have been engaged with the county as well as with other jurisdictions, and I'm comfortable with the county's efforts to assess the prospects of renaming the road within the scope of their jurisdiction, and I will support those efforts. My own view is that it is important that any decision by the council regarding the road's renaming be consistent with the efforts of the county. I think it would be a bad idea for us to be making independent determinations about the name of the road without regard to directions the county is likely to be taking. So as a result, I am frankly opposed to any what I view to be half measures in the interim, including honorific use of multiple names for the same street. To me, that would be an expensive and pointless waste of time and only create confusion with the traveling public. So my own perspective on this, I understand that there is a desire among many on the council and among the public to move this process forward expeditiously, but I think before we take action, it's important to let the county's process move forward and to work with different jurisdictions throughout the Ross Valley to create a coherent and integrated outcome that respects the interests of all of those who have a view on this matter. So that may not be satisfying to some who want to make a decision tonight. I don't think a decision tonight is called for necessarily. I don't think that's consistent necessarily with the process that all of the different jurisdictions who have participated in this process have envisioned. So my recommendation would be to defer action by the council on this until we have an understanding about where our neighboring jurisdictions, and that mostly means the county, are likely to go on this issue. If the county decides that the name shouldn't be changed, then I think that will inform our decision. If the county decides that within its jurisdiction, the name should be changed, I think it would be important for us to understand that before we take any action. So with that, my suggestion is that we continue to table this issue until we can be better informed about what our sister jurisdictions have in mind. And those are my comments. Scott, yes, your hand's up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Kevin, normally I would follow you to the end of the earth because I think you're a fantastic leader, and I usually agree with everything that you say. However, on this particular occasion, I disagree in the sense that I think we as an independent jurisdiction need to have our own opinion. It's not being written in stone. You know, if we decide whatever we decide, and 3 months later, the county decides something different, we can always come back and revisit this issue. But we could couch it as a tentative decision if that's something that makes everybody feel more comfortable. But I think the public at this point is looking for us to have some kind of resolution for this issue, give our opinions, and move on to other issues that are facing our community. So, and I also believe that the county is looking for the different jurisdictions to have their own opinion. You know, I don't think the right way to do this is for all the individual jurisdictions to say, hey, county, you make the decision and we'll just follow what you do. I think the county is saying, okay, everybody decide what you want to do, and we'll see if there's a consensus, and maybe it'll be, you know, 4 jurisdictions one way and 1 the other, and then that one may reconsider. But I think they're looking for everybody to give their opinion. So I think it would be helpful to the county for us as a council to have our own opinion of the way we'd like this to go forward, and whether, you know, how that motion is worded. I'm very flexible, but I think there should be some motion and some decision tonight about where we stand on this issue. That's my opinion.
Okay, well, thank you for that. We all have reviews. Anyone else want to chime in at this point?
A point of clarification, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Were your comments meant to express a motion waiting for someone to either move it or second it?
My comments were expressly intended not to make a motion at this point.
Well, I thought I heard move to continue.
Well, if a motion to continue is required to continue, that's fine. I guess I was not intending to advocate for a motion to make a decision on this issue tonight. So if it's a procedural question you're asking, I appreciate that, and that would be a motion to continue.
So moved.
Oh, that is.
So I'll yeah. But we may have a motion already on the table, and I don't want to cross the lines in terms of what we should be doing procedurally. So perhaps our city attorney can advise us about who goes first on this.
Well, I guess I would say I would first treat the discussion that's been had so far as discussion, and I guess in consideration of Councilmember Paulson waiting to make his motion, I might say that you also were waiting to make a motion, and if you want to now invite motions, then we could see who wants to make the first one, and we could proceed from there.
So at Vice Mayor Helmer's suggestion, I'd be happy to make a motion to continue.
I'm sorry, Kevin, your audio went out. Can you say that again?
Vice Mayor,
I was going to withdraw my motion to continue following your lead, so that Councilmember Paulson could present his motion.
And if that's the wish of the council, that's fine. But it would be my intent to move at an appropriate time to continue. But if Councilmember Paulson wishes to present the council with a motion at this time, I will defer.
Yeah, I just actually, Mayor, if I just want to make a comment, because I first wanted to say I've worked with you a lot, and we worked with the mobile home park, and now we're deliberating over the Sir Francis Drake naming. And I do appreciate the time, the thoughtfulness, the opinion pieces. And it's a really hard thing. This may be one of the first split council decisions we have. We generally have really good consensus because I think, not that we're groupthink, but that we really do, thoughtfully look at the evidence and do have convergence. On the comments you made, I just wanted to invite you to think about our obligation to the community. So I'm a little concerned that if we follow the county's lead in what goes on in San Geronimo or out by Point Reyes, it doesn't reflect what the 21 people who are attending now say, doesn't reflect the people last week or all the public comments I've read or all the outreach I've done. I just want to, like you, I really want us to come together as a council. So I'm not going to push my motion right now. I just want to say that we're all in this to have social justice. This isn't winning a motion or not winning a motion. I think we really want to see the best for the community. And I feel, there's a range of opinions, but basically I've kind of taken two litmus tests. One was a little bit like what Scott brought forth, which is, what is Drake himself? What is the philosophy? Where do I stand? And the second is, am I really a good elected representative? Am I really listening to people and trying to filter out, the vocal minority, which I disagree with anyone who said it's just a vocal minority. It's not. It's a lot of people who want the name change. It's a lot of people who don't want the name change. And there are probably a lot more people who are saying, please deal with fire, with housing, with business and so forth. And in my synthesis of all that information is that it behoove us to make a decision tonight so that we can move on other things. And it's not one, as Scott said, that's fixed in stone. We can revisit it. It's also not saying that we're against it. We would honor the people who really say this is offensive, it's colonial, and so forth. And we honor the businesses. And, Catherine walked through the business park, and there are many, many, many businesses. And this is probably the last thing they want right now. So I think our decisiveness is actually a service to the community. And that's why I'm advocating the position. And we can take either motion first. I don't want to push it through. I just want to feel like the people have been served and the council is really thoughtful about the decision we make.
Yeah, and I appreciate that very much. And I thought that those are thoughtful suggestions. I just want to clarify, though, my own comments. As I said, I think my own personal views on this subject are well known, and I'm not here to advocate for those views. My comments were really directed at a practical consideration, which is what I view is the importance of avoiding multiple names for a single road, and an important road within the city or the county of Marin. And I worry that by taking independent actions without regard to what our neighboring jurisdictions may still decide will compromise that. If that's the decision of the council, then that's the decision of the council. I think it's ill-advised, and I will oppose it. But I will not stand in the way of those who think that that is something that we should consider. So I think, Catherine, you had your hand up? Or not? Was that Scott?
Yeah, it looks like Scott does.
Okay.
Kevin, I just had a question, which is there some way that we can, compromise such that we can have Gabe's motion and add to the motion that we will revisit this if the county rules otherwise, or that we can make it so that we can have our opinion set that this is where we are right now, but yet give us the flexibility that you're looking for, so that if the jurisdictions around us decide they want to go in a different direction, we still feel like we have the ability to morph into so we don't have this disjointed situation, and we have a better chance of county-wide unity.
So to answer your question, I think the answer is yes, we can have any motion that folks want. And we can revisit decisions that are made tonight or at any time. I think that would be counterproductive personally, but if that is a desire on the part of the council to proceed in that fashion, I think we would be, we should all allow that to happen. It would be my preference to table this matter until we have more information about what our sister jurisdictions are doing. That won't take that long. As I said, the process, I think, was envisioned to be concluded for all jurisdictions by the end of March. But if it's important for this council to state a position that may influence the outcome of that decision process tonight, and Councilmember Paulson wants to make that motion, he's free to do that.
Okay, so I'm willing to move that we adopt a co-naming. According to the staff report, there were 3 options. So I don't know if we need to be specific about that, but it seems to me that having both names would be perhaps the simplest and the least expensive and give us flexibility. So I move that we go for the staff report suggestion of the dual names and yeah, and
just to be clear, I don't think the staff report was making a suggestion. It was providing an alternative. So
correct. There were 3 options laid out. I'm simply trying to narrow it down, but that's
fine. Make your motion however you wish to. I just don't want to mischaracterize what the staff report was actually doing.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, just for clarity.
Councilmember Candell, you have a comment here? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Just for clarity, with the motion that you're discussing, I think it's a little vague with the co-naming, you know, how the signs are going to be, what's going to look like, what's going to go into it. So if the motion was made generally, such as we're going to keep the present name and we're going to augment it with something to, however you see fit to word that, I would be very happy to support that, if that makes any sense. I don't want to lock in exactly, because I don't know if co-naming is kind of defined in a way of that's going to lock us into something that's going to cause a problem in the future. So I think the more general it is, the more support you may get.
So just as a point of clarification, could I ask our city attorney if Sky, you think there's sufficient clarity in the scope of the motion that is before us at this point?
And I see, I see Dan's hand raised. Why don't I let him go first, and then I'll address the procedural issue.
Okay, yeah, because that was a procedural question only. So Vice Mayor Hilmer?
He met me, Mr. Mayor.
Dan Schwartz.
Oh, and I have a comment as well when Dan Schwartz is finished.
Okay, go ahead.
Co-naming is a very vaguely defined term. And in the little bit of information we gave you, the staff report, there's no Caltrans rules about co-naming. There's no unified vision of what that means across the country. I would, if I could offer a suggestion, I think the marriage of Councilmember Paulson and Councilmember Candell's suggestions is that Councilmember Paulson's suggesting a motion of retaining the legal name of Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, but advocating for some sort of ceremonial second name that adds context. And I think you could make that your motion, and that would give you the opportunity, as Councilmember Candell is talking about, to signal to the other jurisdictions that you want to have a different conversation now. You want to have a conversation about the legal name of the street and some other name, honorary name, something that recognizes a broader historical context. Now, if that's okay, that's a pretty long motion. That would be my city manager.
So what I was actually going to, without being that precise, in response to your request, Mayor, I was going to ask Councilmember Paulson if that, to clarify basically if the scope of his motion, but I understood it to be one of support for a co-naming approach. I think Dan Schwartz just outlined a specific form of that. And so I think the clarification to Councilmember Paulson would be, has the city manager accurately captured what you're proposing as a motion for the city council to endorse a co-naming approach to the street?
Yes, I think so.
I think that's clear enough as a motion.
Oh, okay. All right. Good enough. Any other comments before we, I mean, I think we still need a second if that is understood to be the motion. Gabe, if that's your motion, are there other comments from council?
Vice Mayor
second.
Helmer.
I think the conversation has captured what I need to have heard.
Okay. Anything else?
So
I will start. Go ahead.
let me I just took some clarification. So the motion is that the Larkspur City Council supports retaining the name Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, but will consider the possibility of co-naming. Is
No.
that what I'm understanding this to be? Then make sure you frame it for me a little bit more clearly.
No, I don't think that's accurate.
Okay, well then help me figure out what the exact.
It's Gabe's motion, so I think you ought to articulate it.
Yeah, I'll ask Dan to repeat. I think he articulated it really well.
Well, in fairness, I do think Councilmember Way's sort of given a very concise expression of what I was saying, which is, I think the motion is that you want the legal name to remain Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, but you'd like to explore co-naming or perhaps some other way to recognize a broader historical context of Sir Francis Drake, of Marin, of New York, whatever is the appropriate thing. And those are the things to be talked about. So I think to Councilmember Candel's point, saying we want to be part of a conversation with others, but this is where we want to be. That's what I'm trying to suggest for your motion, is that I heard a majority of the council say you wanted to take a general position tonight about the name Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, and then signaling what you might want to converse about next is the other part of the motion.
And that's all fine. I just want to get clarity about what exactly the motion is. And if Councilmember Paulson is comfortable with that articulation of the motion and other council members are okay with moving forward, we'll just need a second and a vote.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that, it's a little bit of fine tuning, but the key elements are the legal name is Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. The ceremonial name, the only reason I hesitated isn't just exploring it. I'm moving that we do add a ceremonial name. That's it's not that we may or may not. We really want to acknowledge all of the community that has asked for there to be a change, in our in our name for the street. So
Councilmember Way.
That's a little different. So
I think Councilmember Way might have summarized it correctly then. And is that right, Councilmember Paulson? So that we can help the mayor, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Catherine, you were saying explore, but it is that we add a second name, but it's ceremonial. It's not a legal name. It won't require business to change their letterhead and so forth.
Could I offer, I hate to add words, but ceremonial name or appropriate historic designation? Because I think there are models that we haven't looked at yet where other people have done things like this for corridors that are of historic nature that
that's
combine things that happen over time.
That's why I would prefer to table the whole thing. But if we have a motion, let's restate it. And if it's Catherine's articulation or Gabe's, whoever's making the motion, just please state it. Let's get a second, and we'll get it up to a vote.
Well, Gabe put it forward, so.
Yeah, so I move that the Larkspur City Council retain the legal Sir Francis Drake Boulevard name and explore adding the second name, the co-name, for all the, all the residents, businesses, and lots in our jurisdiction.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, sorry, I hate to interrupt in this, but I really do want to make sure that, because I just want to make sure, because I feel like I've heard a couple of things. So the way I would articulate it in part would be the city council the motion is that the city council would support co-naming of the street with the legal name remaining Sir Francis Drake, but that an additional name would be added with the exploration being what that would be, how you would go about doing it.
Not sure that makes a lot of sense. That's confusing me even more.
But yeah, sorry. And I'm trying, I wanted to avoid making this more complicated, but I just wanted to, I guess what I'm trying to clarify is the exploration of whether or not to have a second name, or is the exploration of what the second name would be. I think that's the part of the motion that I wanted to make sure we were all walking away with the same understanding of.
Yeah, so my motion is that it's the exploration of what the name would be. And, we would make it consistent with the county if I need to add that. And if it clarifies it anymore, I think, this was laid out in the staff report. We're really just trying to adopt, that report gave 3 different ways of doing this. We're looking at implementing one of those ways. Legal name is Sir Francis Drake. We have a second name. We're awaiting what that second name is. In the spirit of what Kevin was saying, we want to be consistent with the rest of the county and the other jurisdictions.
So Gabe, could I just ask again for you to articulate precisely what your motion is? Because I don't know that did it.
Okay. Yeah, and I apologize for the wordsmithing here. It looks like Scott has a point.
Gabe, just before you do, I was just asked, Vice Mayor Hilmer made a suggestion of just an addition to your motion. It gives it a little flexibility, which I agree would be a good idea. So it's and Vice Mayor Hilmer, if you could just, you just gave an extra couple of words to put on there that gave a little flexibility, which I think made it strong. Could you repeat that?
After the words co-name or keeping the legal name and exploring a co-name, and my added words are 3, or historical designation. Because there are designations that have to do with characteristics, special historic character or scenic or historical figures, things that took place along the corridor. I mean, there are things that we haven't studied where what we're trying to do fits into a methodology that has been adopted by others trying to do these things. And I just want to give us the flexibility to find the right thing before we just say a co-name. Because it might be something better than a co-name. We just don't know yet. Because if we don't have that flexibility, then I think just continuing it until we really understand what it is we're trying to look for is best.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was my intent that, the other jurisdictions will be deciding, as Kevin is suggesting, we wait for, and we don't need to wait, whatever historical designation or, ceremonial name they come up with would be adopted as the second name. We're not looking to, invent it here. So
just as a matter of process, I just want to wrap this up because I think we've had a lot of good conversation. That's helpful. But I want to get a clearly articulated statement of the motion that is in front of us, and I don't think I have it yet.
Okay. So I'll try again. That the city of Larkspur moves to retain the Sir Francis Drake Boulevard as the legal name, will adopt as a co-name what other jurisdictions, what the consensus of the other jurisdictions is, and in the absence of that, explore, a name of historical significance or a ceremonial name.
Okay, Skye, is that a sufficiently articulated motion?
I think so.
Okay, do I have a second?
And okay, question is, Skye, did that motion reflect Vice Mayor Hilmer's addition?
I just would have included the word designation in there as a option as opposed to a literal name. Sometimes you can layer these things.
Yeah, I believe that Councilmember Paulson did include as part of the exploration historic designation.
Okay, so,
All right, in that case, I would be happy to second that motion.
okay, and so we're all comfortable that we have a motion that everyone understands. Okay, I guess in that case, let's call for a vote.
Councilmember Candell,
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Way,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hilmer,
Yes.
Mayor Haroff.
No. Okay, so we have a vote. So I think we now move on to our next agenda item. So let me pull things up.
While you're doing that, Mr. Mayor, I think we're required when there's a split vote to acknowledge that there was one dissenting vote, the Mayor Haroff. Even though we all heard you, I think we're supposed to enter that in the record.
Yeah, no, that's I would appreciate that actually. Okay, anything more on agenda item number 7.1? Then I think we can move to 7.2, consideration of the use or disposition of Sir Francis Drake statue. And I think we'll have a staff report on that issue now.
Similarly to the last item, the council asked us to bifurcate to all of the Sir Francis Drake issues that we had encompassed in one hearing at your last meeting. So this is the second matter, which is the city owns the Sir Francis Drake statue that was removed to prevent it from being damaged by threat of damage by protesters. And we are currently storing it and need to make some decisions about its long-term use or disposition. And so we've suggested to the council 3 general categories of options. One is to put it back in its previous site. One is to identify another public site in Larkspur, and the other is to authorize staff to initiate a disposition process. And that would involve us first reaching out and discussing options with the artist. At your last meeting, some of the council members expressed an interest in a 4th option, which is to store the statue and defer this decision. So that is something we want to acknowledge for the record is up for discussion this evening. We don't yet have a good price tag for that. We looked around Larkspur and there aren't really any good publicly owned locations, at least city-owned locations where we could do that. So if the council is interested in that path, I think the Public Works Director and I would require some time to explore more options in detail. And one of the things we are trying to get is a firm deadline from our current hosts so that we know how long we truly have before we need to move it. So that is where things stand, and I turn it back to the council.
Okay, thank you for that. Dan, do we have any comments or questions from the council for our city manager on this? Yes, Scott, I think I'm seeing your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. The option where you said find another location, has the staff looked into any other locations, or is the option, if we choose that option, we basically start looking now and then come back to it to see if we did find another location?
Well, I think if you're in Larkspur, you'd really be talking about one of our public parks as the only real viable property that we own that's large enough for us to put this statue in. So we didn't go out and research if one park's better than another. And I think we'd want to do some level of community engagement to ask folks how they would feel about it being in one of those locations. So we are offering that up as an option, knowing we haven't yet done any community engagement to see how folks would feel about that.
Okay, any other comments or questions from the council? Not seeing any, so I think this probably requires us to open again a public hearing, correct?
That's correct.
So let's do that and invite the public to contribute their views.
Our first public comment will come from Georgetta Beck.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Thanks,
Hi.
Thanks, Georgetta.
My name's Georgetta Beck. I'm a resident of Larkspur. I respectfully request that any attempt to permanently get rid of the sculpture be halted and that suitable arrangements be made to find a safe place to store it until Larkspur is out of the woods with respect to the pandemic. To dispose of the sculpture at this juncture disregards the overwhelming wishes of your constituents and demonstrates a brazen disrespect for our former council members who sought to celebrate the work of our local artist by adding his creation to our landscape. Further, it will damage the reputation of the artist, a recipient of Smithsonian recognition, no less. I believe the reputation of our community is also at stake when word gets out that Larkspur caved to mob rule and disposed of a sculpture that most people thought depicted a fictional character. Further, trying to dispose of it creates a whole host of new problems around the method and manner of getting rid of it, as I outlined in my written public comment. A few of you on the council have expressed hostility towards this sculpture in previous hearings. Indeed, recusal has been demanded for, quote, prejudging the result. To assure that the public that the decision-making process is indeed fair, I respectfully request that the council do the following. First, provide the community with what process and guidelines you intend to follow in arriving at a final decision. Removal of public art should be cautiously applied only after a careful and impartial evaluation of the artwork to avoid the influence or fluctuations of taste and the premature removal of a work. I attached a sample guideline to my written public comment. Second, play at the hearing the YouTube video entitled The World of Dennis Patton so that the public can see the man behind the sculpture and gain an understanding about why former council members wanted to pay him tribute. The sculpture has stood for 30 years without incident. Its presence has wormed its way into the hearts of many members of our community who overwhelmingly thought it depicted Don Quixote. What significant advances toward improving inequalities can reasonably be achieved by removing an art piece that is the subject of wildly conflicting interpretations? The decision is being made in haste, tensions are high, the pandemic continues to wreak havoc. History will not view kindly any attempt to force a council member's personal opinion about what the art piece represents down the throats of the vast majority that do not subscribe to that interpretation. I want to end with a short quote from the art critic from the New York Times. She states, quote, "In a democracy, destroying a work of art is never a solution to any offense it may give. Once art has been made and released into the often choppy flow of life, it should stay there. To dictate its elimination is similar in spirit to the deliberate demolition of ancient art by the Taliban. Thank you for your public service."
Thank you, Georgetta. I appreciate those comments. And if the city clerk could make sure that the timer is run on any additional comments, I'd appreciate that. Just to keep things going.
You're not city clerk. I apologize.
Please.
You got to blame the right person, though. That was me, Mr. You need to blame the right person. That was me.
No, I'm sorry. I thought Allison was doing it, so I'm going to blame you then. So that's fine.
Yep.
That's fine, and it's not a big deal. I don't think we did anything that went beyond what we were contemplating. So do we have another speaker?
Yes, our next public comment will come from Joan Lundstrom.
Joan, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just unmuting.
Good. You're on.
Okay. Until now, I've argued vociferously for returning this artwork by our Marin artist to its original site by the bay and for changing the name to Don Quixote. However, I've reluctantly concluded it's too risky to reinstall a 30-foot tall steel sculpture there because of the potential public vandalism. The decisions being made for us. And I truly wish times were different. So let's think carefully about how we go forward and making something positive about the dilemma, because it is truly a dilemma. Let's look at this as a teaching moment. I'm going to focus on the site. And according to our local history book, there is the Larkspur past and present, 3 Indian villages, one of which may have been the largest in Marin, were situated nearby at San Quentin. So let's make this an interpretive site by the bay and recognize the original inhabitants. My idea is that have Dennis Patton, the artist, get a commission to use his creativity to make an art piece to be installed there, a composition acknowledging the Indian settlements prior to colonialism. I looked at his website and he has some interesting like 14, 15-foot sculptures that might be relative to it. Then place a nearby plaque acknowledging that Sir Francis Drake might have landed there to repair his ship Golden Hind, because as our Larkspur history book says, it's there's little solid evidence that he actually was there. And then include our most recent history. We did a Sir Francis Drake sculpture, which was donated to the city as public art, but it had to be removed, and the implications of that. And we can then incorporate other displays along the waterfront of Coast Miwok Indian life. In other words, use the site where all this happened as past history and current history. And we can incorporate this as part of our Larkspur history. So if you're determined to go forward and not have the sculpture on a public site in the city, hold further public hearings on this to determine our various options, but first by consulting with the artist, Dennis Patton. So let's work forward to make this, going forward, make this something positive. And I'm talking about the site itself as an opportunity.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Joan, and thank you for your ongoing service to our community. It's greatly appreciated. Is there anyone else in the public who would like to contribute on this subject?
Our next public comment will come from Kevin Carroll.
Okay.
Thank
Kevin.
you again. One of the things that occurred to me is if the staff might consider the possibility of storing it in something secure like a shipping container on the Rose Garden site, since it is being considered as a possible site for a library sometime in the future. I could possibly work out to rename it Don Quixote, and what a perfect place to put it, but a library. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. And you are well within our time limit, so I appreciate that. Anyone else in the queue here?
Our next comment will come from caller ending in 1402.
Hello. I think we
And this caller
got someone muted. The caller's muted. The caller needs to unmute.
Caller, I believe you dial star. I believe you'll dial *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, I will come back to this caller after. Our next comment will come from Danette City.
Hi, thank you again for allowing me to participate.
And Danette, can you just state for the record where you live?
Right now I'm in Sacramento, but I was born and raised in Marin County, as well as my parents were born and raised in Marin.
Okay, fair enough. Good. Thanks.
And I always knew that statue to actually be of Don Quixote. That was my understanding when it was erected, that it was of Don Quixote. And just two thoughts for you. Censoring art, I don't agree with, even though there's plenty of art out there that I find deeply offensive, especially to women. But it's not my place. Art is art, and it's a form of freedom of speech. And so it worries me, this notion of troubling art, censoring art. So that's one thing. The other thing is, Don Quixote is one of the greatest works of literature ever written. And that's still the consensus, that it was an incredible work of art, literature, and perhaps the greatest work of literature ever written. So I want you to think of those things as you mold this decision, because I think it's a tough decision. I hate to see you have it put back up and then it gets destroyed again, it gets vandalized again. So I really weigh that, but that thought is a worry for me as well. But I want you to think about those things, about censoring art. Is that really the right thing to do? And then also, it is a work of art that honors, in my opinion, in my belief, an incredible work of literature that actually was social commentary for its time. And if you haven't read it, read Don Quixote. It's an exceptional work. Or at least buy the radio dramatization of it and listen to that. So that's all I wanted to say. Just a couple of thoughts to help you think about as you weigh this really important decision. Thank you, and best wishes to all of you.
Okay, thank you, Danette, very much for those comments. Allison, do we have anyone else?
Our next comment will come from Lauren Brown.
Hey everyone, it's Lauren. I just wanted to call. Thank you for your time. I'm calling on behalf
And Lauren, can you
of,
just Lauren, could you tell us where you live, just so we know?
I live in Gerstle Park in San Rafael, but I was born and raised in Green Bay. I went to Redwood High School.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I am married to a Black man, and it was just very, very clear from us driving up and down Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, and the fact that we plan to raise kids in Marin County, that it's just very apparent that having big statues dedicated to colonialism, and the artist definitely stated in an interview that we all saw that he dedicated this, and this was Sir Francis Drake. So it is up for interpretation, but that's exactly what the artist said he modeled the statue after. And anyway, it's just I just want to reflect that when I raise my kids in Marin and they're going to be biracial, it's just going to be a really tough conversation to explain to them potentially that Marin has chosen to create sculptures and dedicated large streets to a colonizer, to someone who has a history of the slave trade. I mean, we've been having these conversations for months now, so I just really want to thank you for your work in bringing all these subjects to light. I mean, there's just so many positive things that have come from the removal of the statue. The Coast Miwok Tribal Council has formed. They've been invited to speak at numerous different events. We're starting to take into consideration more points of view. When the statue was erected, it was from an all-white council. This council here is not very diverse. So it's just wonderful that people like yourself, Kevin, are open to hearing more perspectives and actually listening to the people who are saying that images like this statue and street names like Sir Francis Drake are harmful. So I just really want to, again, continue the work that you are doing and encourage you to do so. And yeah, just know that you're on the right path. And, we have a lot of older generation people calling in, and it's just very clear that, yeah, there's just a lot of learning to do in this community. And people are scared for change, and that's kind of human nature, but Marin County needs to keep growing and becoming more inclusive. So Larkspur is taking, the steps in that direction. So again, thank you so much. We are with you, and yeah, just hope we continue to make this space and community more inclusive. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lauren. And Gerstle Park is a great neighborhood. Spent a lot of time there. So who's next in the queue?
I'd like to note that we received an emailed public comment. We received 9 emails prior to the meeting, which were sent to the City Council and posted on the online agenda packet. and we've received one other written comment. This comes from Brenda Brown, who writes, "Please vote to safeguard the Dennis Patton Don Quixote sculpture. I support the points made in Georgetta Beck's opinion piece read tonight and published in the IJ today. Thank you, Brenda Brown." And I'll return now to our speaker list. A caller ending in 1402, if you're able to unmute yourself this time.
There he goes.
James Holmes, Larkspur. We can always get rid of something, but having done that, we can't get it back if we change our minds. So please don't act in haste. The current controversy is likely just a hiccup in the long run. Surely the least persuasive reason for never putting back the statue anywhere is fear that someone tearing it down might hurt themselves. As the attorneys on the council might agree, that would be a classic case of the vandals assuming the risk. In any case, I fear that doing away with the sculpture forever would say two very unfortunate things about Larkspur. Number one, that threats of violence and vandalism work here, and number two, that nihilism wins here. One of the saddest things about the current situation is that what is left now is just a blank space. It's not a case of replacing something with a better thing. It's a case of replacing something with nothing, which seems sad and pathetic. A real tragedy here is that the sculpture's sudden removal short-circuited a community dialogue about what might replace or augment the sculpture, and whether those wanting a change would put their money where their mouths were. With the sculpture gone, the incentive for that discussion is gone. I'm not sure whether the Miwoks had any monumental architecture or art which might take the place of the sculpture comparable to the totem poles that one speaker said might be used elsewhere. But Councilmember Hilmer's idea that the sculpture could be a literary symbol of the new library is an example of what creative possibilities the future might reveal. Please don't foreclose those possibilities by hasty action now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, James. So that, I think, Allison, that you're trying to get him back into the queue, and I don't know if anybody else is still in there.
We do have one last public comment from Larry Chu.
Okay, good, great. Larry, you're on.
Hi, good evening. You've already heard my comments before. I'm not going to repeat them, but one of the things I want to take off the table in this whole debate is, you know, if you want to know what the artist's intentions are, all you need to do is go to their website. You know, there's several pictures side by side of the statue, and it says Sir Francis Drake. So, you know, I don't know how people are looking at history, but that's what it says now. And, you know, I know our country has gone through a period where we argue two sets of facts, but right now I just see the one. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. As usual, you bring to light important things. Appreciate that. Is Larry the last one, Allison, or anyone else?
That is correct. There is no further raised hands and no further emailed comments.
Okay, great. Thank you so much to the public for contributing. And with that, I think we'll close the public hearing part of this proceeding and bring it back to the council for comments and reflections. Do we have anyone on the council who would like to make comments or observations? Catherine?
I appreciate everyone's comments. This has been an ongoing issue for us since June of last year. I am also concerned about this, as somebody said, the censoring of art. But I really think we need to think practically about the public safety issue. This was removed in July last year after being defaced with red paint that was splashed on it, after having one of its attempted to saw through one of its support pillars about around the foot. There was a social media post, I actually screenshot it, that was posted in July saying Drake must fall, share it far and wide. This statue is massive and will need several hundred people to topple. I couldn't, we couldn't let a 30-foot metal sculpture with lots of edges land on potentially on hundreds of people. And I still think that risk exists out there. Whether we like it or not, that risk does exist to our law enforcement officers who would have to be involved in a protection of public safety there, to possibly motorists who are driving down Sir Francis Drake Boulevard in front of there, should there be another group of individuals who would like to cause harm to this sculpture. So my feeling is that although we've protected it now for the time being, perhaps there is an person with very appreciative of supporting this art piece on their private land who might be interested in maintaining the integrity of the art piece, but not within the public sphere. So I continue to hold that we cannot safely put it back in that place. And thank you, Joan Lundstrom, for reiterating that, because I think the risk is just too great to our community when people in the dead of night can do a lot of damage.
Anyone else on the council wants to offer a comment? Gabe, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to reflect on some of the comments tonight, which were, really helpful, and I thought they were also representative. So specifically, Georgetta, what you were speaking to, I just wanted to call out your about process. And in your public comment, which we can all see, on the website, attachment D, there were basically 4 conditions, to be inclusive, to work with professionals, to connect with the artist, and to state reasons. And I just wanted to communicate with you that I think we've been doing that. The inclusivity, I have in my own log here over 50 comments and several council meetings. So I think we're meeting that standard, and working with professionals. I think we have had many historians and PhDs and numerous people just show us how interpretive this can be. And we have connected with the artist through the city staff. And I think Catherine just stated one of the main reasons. It may seem like mob mentality, but our job on the city council first and foremost is public safety. And that was the decision we took, and the threat assessment is still there. So I just want people to know that the council is weighing all this, taking this seriously. And then the second reflection I wanted to make was really both on Lauren's, comments and Joan's comments, Joan Lundstrom and Lauren Brown. I think I really appreciate, Lauren, you brought, I think, the petition in the first place, and you were very active last June, and I have all my notes here and remember what you said. And I think the intention of this council, I just want to restate, really is inclusivity and social justice. And, it may look like, 5 white people in the room, but I'm trying to reframe the conversation and invite you also to think about the means and the ends again, that we really long-term want this to be a safe place, a welcoming place, and possibly by, certain symbols may actually get in the way. At least that's what I've been seeing here. And Joan, I love the notion, and especially because you were so involved in putting this together as you were mayor, in getting a positive, constructive solution, which is essentially what Lauren was saying as well. How do we move forward? So my last comment is, in moving forward, I think the option of storage should probably still be explored. I don't feel the same urgency as in the last business item. I really wanted us to go to the co-naming so we can really move to equity in other ways and work on other issues. But here, I think it would be a mistake to put it on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. It may or may not, be something we can auction off. I do think money is important. So perhaps the city manager can continue, the research he was doing with the public works director to see what storage options are available. And that way, I don't think the inaction is going to be controversial for anybody. So that's the suggestions I have. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else from the council? Scott. Scott, you're unmuted.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my comment is I would love it if we as a council could ask staff to explore realistic possibilities of different locations. Because at this point, I don't know if there really are any realistic possibilities. And I would also love, I know Councilmember Way's position is there's still a viable threat. I would love to hear from police departments, someone to see kind of what level that's at, because I'm hesitant again to, and I know people have expressed this, and I agree with it philosophically, that the whole mob mentality, you don't want to set a precedent where now something else is offensive to some group and they get torches and pitchforks and say, take it down or we're going to cause a problem, and it just goes on and on. So I would love for us to try to, if we can, put that safety issue aside. If we have to wait it out, we wait it out, and then just make a decision based on, do we think the statue is offensive? Do we want to remove it for that reason, or do we want to find another home for it? And is another home possible? I think that's, and I agree with Councilmember Paulson that I don't see the urgency here, as long as there's a storage facility that if this was to take a little bit longer to get it right, I would be in favor
of it. Anyone else on the council?
Through the mayor.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to say
Vice Mayor Helmer, please. Dan, up. I think we got
everybody's comments.
Oh, Dan, can you please restate? You've got a Wi-Fi issue.
Oh, can you see me and hear me now?
Yeah, now. Yeah, you were breaking up though. Go ahead.
I just wanted to amplify what Joan Lundstrom had to say. I think there's particular strength in the opportunity that this presents us with how we can move forward from this moment and use that site as a place where we can describe the past and the present and the future with enhancements to that property, probably not including putting the statue back. And then following Catherine Way's ideas expressed in previous months about how there might be interest in somebody purchasing the art piece for their private property. Now this builds on our previous public hearing. You losing me again?
Yeah, you're fading in and out.
I'll reserve my comments.
Okay, that's fine. Aren't Zoom calls awful? Just to clarify, option number 3, and this is a question I think for our city manager. Option number 3, authorize staff to initiate the disposition of the statue. That seems to me to be fairly broad and could encompass a range of possible ways in which the statute could be disposed of, including acquisition by a third party, placement somewhere else in the community, or destruction if that's all that's left. But I don't think that option 3 precludes anyone from coming in and saying, I want to take the statue and put it in my backyard, right?
Well, let's start with destruction is not on the table so that we don't get that. That was a misunderstanding someone had once before. I think there's a letter in the record reminding you that's not really a option.
Okay, fair enough. Sorry, I overstepped.
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure we were clear so I don't get more letters.
Yes.
We meant option 3 more transferring ownership, we would come back to you with whatever that looked like. We would first do our consultation with the artist that's stipulated in the agreement that was made when the art piece was done, when the sculpture was done. After we do that, I think we would map out a plan for how we would go about soliciting interest in purchasing the statue and relocating it, and then we would come back to the council with what that looks like. That's what staff envisions if you were to give us direction along those lines.
Yeah, and thank you for that clarification. I did overstate it, but I mean, what you're describing there is a process for the disposition of the artwork in a way that would involve a third party.
And then on the relocation, Mr. Mayor, I think I suspect that if I made the Public Works Director comment, and I won't, I see he's in the audience, but I won't make him come up tonight. I suspect that there is an engineering solution to place the statue in any public place owned by the city of Larkspur. So it's a cost issue, and then it's an acceptance issue by the community of whether that's a good location to place it. So we're happy to go do some of that analysis, but I just want you to know, I think we can probably come back to you and say, if you want it to be in this public location, it would cost X. And if you want it to be in that public location, it would cost Y. And then you would have to decide how much public engagement you wanted to have about those different options, or if you wanted to nix some of them based on a budgetary constraint.
Catherine, I think
To
your
that,
hand's
point,
raised.
to that point, Dan, we will incur a cost in having to relocate it if we decide to continue maintaining and storing it without displaying it. We will incur a cost in the transportation.
Yeah, it costs us about $20,000 to remove it from its location, and that was a discounted price because the contractor working on the bridge had a crane up the creek that could be brought over to help with the work.
So do you anticipate it wouldn't be as much as 20,000 to move it from its current location to another location for continuing storage?
I think it will be a five-figure number. What it is, I'm not sure, because you're going to need a crane to lift it onto a flatbed truck and move it somewhere.
But it sounds like we're going to have to incur that anyway, because the current location needs it removed probably within a short, within this year, I assume.
We're trying to get a firm position on that so that we'll know what our timetable is. I don't know if we could then expedite some of these processes to avoid incurring that cost ourselves.
And then the only way we wouldn't possibly have not incurring the cost of transportation is if we do the third option, which is to see if it can be rehomed maybe on private land, and then have the individual who purchases it transport it on their cost.
That's right.
Okay.
Right.
Just looking at the dollar amount.
Gabe, your hand's up.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. On that same vein, has there been any appraisal, what the value of the art piece is?
I haven't asked for an appraisal of the art piece. I think I'd have to pull the records, but I think the commissioned cost at the time was $100,000, including that covered constructing it as well, I believe, but I'd need to double check that.
Thank you.
Any other comments from council members? Okay. Well, I think we have a really thorough set of options here for what could be done with the piece. In the absence of any further comments, I'd actually request a motion from a council member to move forward with any one of the three options that have been articulated in the staff report. Do I have a motion?
Just a point of clarification? I thought we were just looking at giving some direction for further.
Oh,
Not,
is that, I'm sorry.
is that what you wanted, Dan, is to,
I think either way from the council is fine. You can give me direction or you can make a motion, whichever
Yeah,
the council prefers.
Yeah. So I'd be interested in hearing what the council prefers. I would prefer motion, but go ahead.
well, I'm interested. I still think we have a little bit of data we need to collect. And one is if there is a possibility. Well, first of all, I hear the consensus is it should not be reinstalled in the location where it was before. But it does have to be removed safely from where it's being stored. So I've heard sort of getting more information about whether it's possible for us to continue to store it on a different location temporarily or on our own property temporarily in a secure manner. And then the third thing I heard was some exploring whether there is a marketplace for it to be purchased by an art collector and stored on and displayed on private property. Is that what I heard? I felt like that. And so there's that information.
But that's option 3, Catherine, just to be clear.
I think, Mr. Mayor, if I understand the summary that Councilmember Way is offering, which I'm happy to take as direction, it's a desire that we frame the information now for you in terms of a process, procedure, and cost matter so that you can understand and pick your options based on those variables. That's what I think I'm hearing Councilmember Way try to
yes.
Bring together all the commentary.
And that's fine if that's the sense of the council.
Well, I think we don't have enough data on costs at this point for those three. We know that I think the consensus that I've heard is it's not to be reinstalled in that same location, but we don't have cost estimates for the other two options.
Okay. So would that be sufficient direction for the city manager to move forwards with a next step?
Yes, I've seen Councilmember Paulson raise his hand a couple times. I didn't know if you want to add something to the direction.
Yeah, no, please, before you answer that question, go ahead, Gabe.
Yeah, no, thank you. Just briefly, I agree with what Catherine was saying, and just wanted to remind that there was the fourth option of storage, which also we don't know the costs or the deadlines. So I would appreciate just having a little bit more data so that we can trade off, and then I think the public might appreciate it as well, so they understand the basis, the process that we're considering. So the direction would be just to research the 3+1 items, and if we have more data, I'm happy to move it and take a vote.
Yeah, I don't think we need a motion. This may be just a matter of consensus, if that's sufficient for the city manager.
I do feel this is sufficient direction. And I'll remind the community and the council had originally asked for this hearing because you wanted the two issues brought back together, and so but we're happy to collect more data. We'll do it quite as quickly as possible so we can get back to you. If I may take the liberty, Mr. Mayor, I did want to note, because former mayor and council member Joan Lundstrom, I think, made an interesting suggestion about what will we do with the site in the conversation that'll need to be had.
Yeah.
One positive in all this is I think the foundation is still in pretty good shape. So
so I'm told.
There is the potential to use it. So I'm pleased to report that. We'll have to do an assessment, but I'm told by staff it's a pretty substantial structure in and of itself.
And when you say the structure, you mean the foundation?
The foundation is in and of itself a structure, and it's actually quite sizable.
Yeah, right. A lot of concrete there. So I think that's helpful, and that'd be worth exploring. And I think our vice mayor has made suggestions along those lines in the past, and I think that's worth considering. Okay, so I think we don't need a motion, but we do have direction, and I think I'm hearing from the city manager that direction is sufficient for present purposes. Is there any more comment from the council?
You may want to say for the record, Mr. Mayor, that you're formally closing the public hearing and the council is taking no formal action.
Yes, okay. I'm sorry, I thought I'd done that, but we are formally closing the public hearing and the council will not be taking any further action at this time.
I think that makes us in pretty good shape for the record. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good deal. All right. So that, I think, concludes agenda item 7.2. And we move on to agenda item 8.1, business items, update on city activities and finances with regard to COVID-19. So a staff report on that would be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're currently preparing for what we expect to, as I mentioned last meeting, will be placed in the red tier any day now. You know, there are some folks who are pretty optimistic. The orange tier's within reach. So for us, operationally, the biggest question marks are in our community services department. We're trying to figure out what services we'll be able to open up and how that should be done at this point. You know, one of the things that we want to handle differently, and so I wanted to take this opportunity to report it out, is we want to figure out a better way to manage the fields so that they're used in a safe and fair manner and everyone has fair and equal access. Recognizing, though, that we have longstanding agreements with some clubs and organizations to use our fields, and so we'll need to honor those contracts. That was a real challenge for us earlier in the pandemic because we were in unprecedented times where you know, folks just want to come out and play and couldn't exactly do that. So we're sorting some of that out. We're actually in talks with Corte Madera to see if we can do something in partnership because they had some similar challenges in Town Park. But I wanted the council to know we are planning and we will try to be better prepared this time so that folks can enjoy our amenities. And then, other than that, we are tracking the federal stimulus money and cautiously optimistic that all local jurisdictions, including Larkspur, will be receiving some money from the federal government.
Just on that, Dan, how's that going to work? I understand the legislation is still getting mucked around in DC, but if we would be expecting monies directly as a result of that legislation, how would it pass in our direction?
In the last iteration that was circulated, it was essentially a direct payment to Larkspur from the federal government of unrestricted money. So that's pretty amazing.
That is pretty amazing.
A big change from the past year. So,
yeah. But we don't have more details on that. It's just that's the way it would work if it were to happen. Hopefully.
That's what we've seen in past versions. I'm hesitant to get in the weeds because I think one of the reasons they're monkeying with the bill is some of these details. So.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It's very confusing in a state of flux, but the fact that we have the prospect of having significant federal dollars being directed to our community in that fashion is encouraging. So, okay, any questions for the city manager on that item? Not seeing any hands raised. In that case, I think we will complete that item and move to item number 9, which is an adjournment. If I could have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
By consensus, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.